Greg, you want to start us off with your initial thoughts on the week, and then we'll take questions?
The week that was or the week that is?
The week coming up.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as I said Sunday, for those of you that were up in Minneapolis, I'm excited for these guys because they've earned their chance to keep playing, and they're playing really well right now. So you get to this point in time, you know that anybody left is a really good team, and we obviously have learned that over the last 48 hours with James Madison. They caught everybody's attention day one of the season with winning at Michigan State, which was well deserved. They were really good in that game, and they've had a phenomenal year to go 31-3 and really old. A lot of transfers, and are obviously playing really well right now. So we'll take off tomorrow afternoon, it looks like, for New York, and practice out there Thursday. All that stuff that comes with the opportunity, and get ready for Friday night. So, like I said, we're continuing to. We started with a little bit of intro yesterday, did more today. We'll ramp that up as we go through the next 2 days, and but we'll have to continue to play well. I think that's the main thing, is where we're at right now, and how we've been playing the last 6 games. We got to keep our foot on the gas in that regard, and see how far we can roll this down the road.
Hey, Greg, one of those players that has been in the program for a few years, Terrence Edwards Jr., good size. What kind of stood out with his guard play in your preparation? Not just scoring, but I believe he's the leading assist man too.
Yeah, I mean, he obviously, ball gets in his hands a lot. They share it really well. The 2-point guards, they play them some together. And then they play him individually as well. But with Edwards, he's like some of the guys we've seen in our league. Whether it be, maybe not quite like Terrence Shannon, but athletically, but that type of ball is going to be his hands quite a bit. He's going to be making plays for others. Just he can score. I mean, he just knows how to find the bottom of the basket. A little bit of Jameer Youngish. I mean, there's. He'll handle the balls at times in transition. He'll play out top with it, but they spread the floor pretty well. I would say, schematically a little similar to Nebraska, minus the bigs don't shoot threes. Bickerstaff doesn't shoot threes to about 15 feet, and Carey has shot a few, but this, it's what everybody's doing. We're doing the same thing too with the 5 wide. Utilizing the spacing on the floor and coverage and trying to create gaps and driving lines and those things. So, but Edwards is a good player. He's the MVP of that league for a reason.
Jeff?
Greg, you've talked a lot about wanting to see Steven be more aggressive, more selfish.
Mm-hmm.
I know you got the technical against Edey the other day. I don't know if that bothered you, but the fact that he kind of stood up against the guy and he wasn't backing down that early in the game. Is that a good sign for you, the way he was approaching it?
Yeah, I think, you want guys to, they have to play within the flow of the game. I mean, that wasn't intentional, for him to get into a little jawing match with Edey, but it's good to see him, kind of stand his ground, and the same thing with Max. Max kind of inserting himself in there too a little bit. Shocker to no one. But the fact that he's aggressive, I think that's the mindset he's in, and he's playing pretty well right now. So we need to continue to, capitalize on his aggressiveness and keep him in that mode.
Jim?
You talked about Chucky's leadership the other day, but he was noticeably more assertive on taking his shot. Was anything to that, or is that just a matter of taking what's in front of him?
I think it's both. I think there's, with assertiveness with your voice can come assertiveness with your play. But I also think, he's getting better as a player. I mean, the jumps he's made even this year, that how good he is in ball screens right now, with pinching guys off, specifically in drop coverages, so, and we've obviously done more ball screens this year than maybe the last 20 some years combined, just because of how we've shifted things offensively. But he's gotten really good at it. you don't see him taking those those hoist shots at the end of the shot clocks anymore. He's inside the paint. He's in there. He's got a mid-range game. He's got little floaters he's working on. And he's more assertive, and I've noticed that even when we were stumbling in February, that his voice was starting to come, and he was starting to really take charge of things. And sometimes you got to be in some adverse situations to really force that to come out. And he's done a great job of that, and his play has backed it up. So now I think he's playing at a really high level.
In the back.
Greg, when you first got into the JMU film, what really jumps off the page for you about them, and what matchups or lack of matchups will work for you guys, do you think?
Well, I think you just look at their numbers, and obviously, and then you watch them play, and we knew they were, they had been on a long winning streak. I didn't realize they did not win the regular season, that Appalachian State had won it, and then obviously JMU won the tournament. But just I think the diversity and the depth that they play with, about 9 guys they'll go with. They move the ball. As I mentioned in the outset, they're old, and you can tell. They've got, Friedel has been around the game for a while. Bickerstaff's been around the game. Edwards, they're all older guys. So there's a lot of experience there, and I think they've kind of pointed towards this year as being their year to make this type of run. But they share it really well. Like I said, the spacing on the floor is evident. Friedel, we've known him. And he was at South Dakota State. He's from South Dakota, so Joe knew his background and everything. So there's a lot of familiarity there. Bickerstaff was at BC, Boston College, before he transferred to JMU, and so there's a lot of. It's such a small degree of separation in our profession. Like, you talk to a couple people, and there's you have dots connected pretty tightly, just of how they play and what they're like, and but the matchups will be. I think we match up fine. I think we've got a versatile enough lineup that we can match up with about anybody, because we can positionally shift people around as we've done through the year. So we'll have to be really good. They're obviously very confident. They're playing really well, as you would expect. This time of year, that there's not a lot of bad teams left.
Doug?
Greg, when you go through a stretch like you and your team went through in February, playing some games well but not getting the result with the final score, how does the messaging change as a coach who's been around and seen a lot more things than your players have? What's the messaging to them to make them believe that they could make the run that they made in Minneapolis and on to the tournament?
You give them some examples of the past. All 3 of the staff members have been on teams that have had stumbling blocks at points and times. Even Kirk's position, he talked about our first year here. I think he was a junior, I believe, when we started out. What did we start out? 1-5, bad. Yeah, they were ready to ship Bo back to Milwaukee. But we got things, it was a belief in it and a confidence in it, and you keep pushing forward. That you're going to get through this, and you show them the good things. Like I said, when we played at Purdue, I left there really encouraged, even though we had lost the game, that we had played really well. And there was other spots where we had played well, maybe not well enough to finish out a game, but you just stay positive with it, and you keep teaching and keep coaching, and keep reminding them they're not the first team to go through it, and they won't be the last. And that's just our own history of various teams through the last 20 plus years that have. You're most likely, there's only really 3 teams maybe in the country this year that haven't gone through a little extended skid. Probably Houston, UConn, and Purdue might be the only 3. So you're going to have some bumps along the way. You try not to make them last 3 weeks, but you're going to have some, and then how do you respond to it? And this group has responded to it exceptionally well.
Michael?
Trying different things with this format behind Tyler. Has Carter earned some extra consideration to play based?
Really depends on matchups. Sunday I went with Carter because I felt we needed more physicality on the glass, and offense wasn't a problem. It was the defense, and Carter's probably a little more adept to help us in that regard. And I thought he did some good things, but defensively and the physicality of the rebounding, it came down to really, as I evaluated the game, transition defense and defensive rebounding, that we had a couple loose balls that we didn't get to, or a couple blockouts we missed that ended up extra possessions. So that's just the flow of the game and what the game was like. I felt we needed more physicality at that position when Tyler got himself in foul trouble. So it'll vary. It's a little different with James Madison. They can play with 4 guards or a more of a stretch 4. So different than, maybe not the size and the physicality that we've seen. There's no Zach Edey there, but so it game by game really is what I'm getting to, Mike, is what I decide on whether it's Marcus or Carter.
To follow up on that, I guess when he's out in that role, is it important for him to be able to just provide something offensively like he's done in the last couple of games?
I mean, yeah, if he can. I mean, I think he understands his lane, and he's done a good job of staying in and understanding what he's good at. And I think that's evolved through the year. I think he's gotten better at understanding punch drive opportunities and offensive rebounding and those things. So, I mean, both those guys have really high basketball IQs. They understand things, really well. They're the 2 guys today that ask the most questions on the floor. I mean, you can just tell their wheels are spinning in terms of what they're thinking about and what they're seeing. So yeah, I mean, the more he can provide, the better. But obviously, we've got other guys that have filled that scoring role.
Seamus?
Greg, when you're evaluating James Madison, how much do you factor in their relatively weaker strength of schedule?
I really don't factor that in because I know they played, they caught the attention right out of the gate back in November when they won at Michigan State. I watched that game yesterday. And they played Akron, who I'm really familiar with John Gross there. And then through their league, we played Arkansas State, at the start of the year, which is who they beat to win their conference tournament. So, and then you look through the other, Appalachian State is typically really good in that league. So I watch more of the style of play and that than, necessarily who they're playing against, because you're not going to find, for the most part, like comparisons, so to speak. Other than Michigan State would be the only one that maybe size-wise matches up, but they played really well at Michigan State and were really scrappy, really hungry. I watched some of that game live back in November, not knowing whether we'd be at this day, but they earned that win. That wasn't a fluke.
Steve, going back to Chucky, just what is it about his game that enables him to kind of succeed when the lights are the brightest, like what we saw last week? And I'm also just wondering if you could sense just how much he's kind of savoring this opportunity after the way his NCAA run ended a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I think, he's put a lot of time in. He's worked at it. He's really changed his body, over the last 18 months to 2 years. He's put time in. I think that's the biggest thing. And when you put time in, you have the confidence to go perform. And he obviously is, he won here as a freshman, a Big Ten championship. He hits the game-winning shot. So he's never been afraid of the moment. Even back in high school, he won state championships. So, but it's the work that he puts in, I think, is the biggest thing that gives him the confidence. You don't just go do it when the lights go on. You put hours and hours and hours in, and he's one that continues to do that. He puts in a lot of shots after practice. Watching film a lot. He's studying guys who he's going to guard. So, I know he's after he rolled that ankle pretty good against Iowa State. He's excited to get back and be in this position.
Jeff?
Greg, you've talked about wanting AJ to attack, especially on 2 feet. I know he likes to settle for jumpers sometimes, but how do you think he did in the Big Ten tournament in terms of getting to the rim as much as you would like?
He got there. I mean, he got there. I'd still like some better finishing, and that's, he has a unique talent that he does some things you can't teach. So we've talked about that. He understands. I think I've watched him get better through games. Not work the first 2 or 3 times, and then by the 4th time he's going in playing off 2 feet, and he knows it. But I think also, like I've talked about before, there's a line there that you you got to let him roll, you know, a little bit, and you provide some guidance. And I've tried not to be. There's been times when I've really gotten after him, and he knows. You know, I think that's the thing about. That's what I like about him so much is that he, you know, he's a little salty when I pull him out, but when the dust settles, he understands, and he's like, yeah, I know, and I think it appears he's extremely appreciative for the growth he's had this year, and because we've coached him pretty hard, and he's been very receptive of it, from it, or to it, and you know, I think he's gotten. I've said all along he might be our most improved player from when we started back in October. But yeah, I mean, we need him to attack, and you know, Terrence Shannon doesn't, you know, every move he makes, and like that's just how the game is now, too. That the charges aren't being called, so how are you going to counter offensively? Just you got to go attack, and get better. And Chucky's done more of that too. I thought maybe he could have had a call or two down the stretch Sunday, but that's where the game is going. They less charges, more blocks, more free throws, more points. So you got to adapt a little bit and play to that when you can.
Jim, don't need to remind you that you guys haven't been to the second week of the tournament in 7 years.
Yeah, you don't remind me.
I'm sorry. I know this week your head's elsewhere, but have you spent much time thinking about that or evaluating why?
No.
As you've pretty consistently said that this tournament's just kind of a matchup based.
It is. It's hard. It's hard to. Yeah. I mean, you look at all the quote unquote upsets that are going to happen and have happened. I mean, there's so much parity, and I keep using that word, and you guys are probably tired of printing it, or writing it. But it's gotten more and more that way, and you're going to see more of that with the portal. I mean, there's going to be more shifting of rosters, and the James Madison of 7 years ago is, look at all the guys that have transferred in there, and it just flips rosters overnight. So, yeah, I mean, you always wanted, the goal is here to go win 6 games. That's the goal. Is this group good enough to do it? If we play really well, yeah, in today's game, you got to score. If you look at the top teams, in fact, I've done the study, so I can even give you the information. Patrick, what did we go back? 5 years ago? When we did the offense-defense flip?
5 years.
So we went back in Ken Palm 5 years and ranked the top 10 defensive teams. They were all in the NCAA tournament. We ranked the top 10 defensive teams this year. 4 of the 10 are not in it, right? Is that what it was? And you flip it and do offense. All the top offensive teams in the country are all high seeds. You got to score. The game has changed. I mean, so hence you've seen us change. You've seen some other programs in our league change maybe their identity, or I mean, you had 4 teams average 80 points or more. We averaged the most we've averaged in 30 years here, because the game is changing. You have to transcend to do that, and most likely, I mean, there's some outliers like a Houston that really locks you down. Iowa State does some of that. But if you look across college basketball, UConn, Alabama, Illinois, Purdue, teams are scoring. Not that defense isn't important and isn't, but the rules have all shifted to favor offense and penalize defense. They want more fouls, more free throws, more points. Everything about it has, all the rule changes in the last, we will look back, every rule change there's been an uptick in scoring, and they've all been made to push scoring up. So you have to stay ahead of the curve, and you know, thankfully we've made shifts fast within the last 2 years, and we got to continue to make more, because that's where the game is.
In the back, Luke. Obviously, you're coming off a game Sunday. By the time you play on Friday, it'll be 11 days since James Madison played in their championship. I mean, is there anything to that?
No, I mean, I'm sure if I was in that position, as I'm sure, is it Mark Byington, right? It's Mark, right? You would set up little intentional game days in between to keep your rhythm, maybe every 3 days. I'm sure they took a few days after the conference tournament championship, but you would set up, take a day or two off, and then practice and have a game type practice where you'd had scoreboard running and compete. So when we've had longer stretches, we've always done that, and that's, I think, some of the conference tournaments that have the earlier championship game, you have to keep a rhythm. You just don't shut it down for 2 weeks and then jump and get ready. You keep some type of fire burning and have a really intense day. Ours will ramp up tomorrow a little bit. Yesterday was just really just a little video, and today was a little bit on the floor. Tomorrow will be a heavier, more intense day to be firing more for Friday night. So,
Zach, on your right. I know Friday's the most important day, but the portal opened yesterday. How are you managing that along with obviously what's happening and what's most important this Friday?
yeah, I mean, we're managing it. You have to do both. You have to. I mean, as much as you have to focus on preparing and winning on Friday. So yeah, we're monitoring the portal. My phone buzzes. So we have a staff text thread that goes that every time somebody of importance, I guess, or of the noteworthy. Not every portal entry would be I don't know how many have happened today, but there was almost 500 yesterday. So yeah, you stay on top of it, and we're in contact with people because you have to be, because the landscape has changed. I mean, that's where we are, and you have to stay ahead of it, regardless of what your needs are or will be or could be, or because it's an ever-changing world.
Have you got to talk to your own guys as well?
No, I haven't. Just because we're playing, I have not. I've left that alone, and I think I'll address that after. Hopefully, that's weeks down the road. If any of them would come to me, I would talk to them about it. But their focus needs to be on the task at hand right now, where most of our focus needs to be, specifically mine. And I got 1 or 2 assistants kind of keeping an eye on it and in touch with people. But we need to focus on what we're doing right now. That's the most important thing.
2 more, maybe 2 more in the front here.
Yeah.
You obviously have a pretty late tip on Friday night. How do you and your staff get your guys prepared for that?
Well, we've had late tips through the year. We played late East Coast games. I think Penn State was a later game. We've done other ones. So you just track we'll practice mid-afternoon tomorrow or early tomorrow, and then out there Thursday will be, I think we have the last open practice of the day, and then we'll go from there to a practice. So you're not going to simulate it exactly, because I don't want us practicing at 9:40 at night, but you'll structure that day. So let them sleep. We'll let them sleep a little later on Thursday, and obviously let them sleep a little later on Friday, and just structure your meal accordingly. But they'll be up bouncing around anyway. I mean, they're going to watch 3 days of games before it's our game day, between the play-in games that start tonight. So these guys would be ready to play, whether it was maybe not 6 a.m., but I don't know how many of them are early risers, but we'll adjust. It's nothing different than how we played through all the year with the different TV times.
Last one in the back.
Greg,
Jeff.
Back to the portal for a second. If you had your druthers, if you had it your way, would coaches like to see the portal, opening the portal, a little push back, so it's not during the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I mean, we dealt with this last year too. As we're running through the NIT, we've got kids on visits, and we're playing yet. So yes, I think ideally you'd like to have it, after the Final Four when everybody's done, because it is a disadvantage if you're still playing, because your focus should be on your team that you currently have. But I know with the window, they went from 60 to 45-day window, right? And they were talking about a 30. Felt 30 was too short. And every school's different in terms of admissions too. If it gets too late, then you may run up against admission deadlines, and those vary from school to school. So yeah, I think there's nothing. We're still trying to figure out this thing nationally. I think we're still trying to get our arms around what's best. Is more better? Is less better? I think we're still adjusting right now. You bet. Thank you. Whose furry friend is this?
That's mine.
Does he have a name? Looks like a chia pet.